Welcome back to We Move Through Stormy Weather, a Phish podcast where we compare and contrast songs and the evolution of their jamming styles throughout the band's career. My name is Ryan Storm, and today I am joined by Pete Mason. Pete is a teacher and writer living in Albany, New York. Counting Down the Number Line is his fourth children's book with illustrator Ryan Kerrigan. He promotes fan art shows and runs phanart.net, highlighting music-inspired fan creations while supporting the Mockingbird Foundation and Groovesafe. He is also publisher for New York State Music. Pete, say hi.
Hey, how you doing, Ryan?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being on today. I'm a huge fan and really excited to talk some Phish with you.
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me on, and likewise.
Yeah. Before we get started and before we talk about what song we're going to do today, I do want to announce, if you haven't seen on the We Move Through Stormy Weather socials already, we do have merch now. Hit the link in our bio on Twitter or Instagram, and I will link it in the description of this podcast episode. We've got shirts, hoodies, beanies, iPhone cases even. So check that out. Very excited about it. So Pete, why don't you talk a little bit about what song you picked for today?
I picked Piper from July 18th, 1999 at Camp Oswego.
Now, why Piper?
Well, it's definitely one of my favorite versions of the song ever. It's kind of overlooked. When people talk about Pipers, everybody's just so used to the 3.0 Pipers where a jam will just bleed into it and just accelerate back up. And I probably saw a half dozen or a dozen Pipers back in the day where it was a slow build all the way up. And this one I have distinct memories of because Oswego was such a memorable show for me. And while all five sets have their merits, that third set, starting with My Soul and then a 25-minute Piper before the cacophony of a Catapulticulus, Smoke on the Water, Wilson, everything. There's just so much going on. After it, that this one kind of gets overshadowed briefly.
Yeah, I was honestly, I hadn't heard this one before, and I'm really glad that you recommended it and picked it for this one, so I've now heard it. But I was surprised when you didn't go with SPAC 04 because that's what I naturally assumed the other person would pick when I eventually did the Piper episode.
I wasn't there, and it's hard to say that because I went to a buddy's wedding and that's 2004, so we were watching the set list roll in on Fantasy Tour, and we were just like, you have to be kidding me, like how great it was.
Piper? Oh my god.
Oh yeah. and I've listened to it and it is a great all-time version, but Piper Oswego Piper stands above it for me just because of my attendance bias.
I think just listening, I think this Oswego Piper is much better than the SPAC Piper.
There is.
In that jam, there's a lot of wasted space, and I think the section from like 17 to 25 minutes is like so phenomenal, but the rest of the jam isn't that much to write home about.
Yeah, there's good chunks to it, and I definitely listen to it maybe once a year, but Oswego Piper gets a little more rotation because it's just nonstop energy start to finish. There's a good section, there's 5 minutes of intro, about 7 or 8 minutes of Machine Gun Trey, and then the rest of them just all locked in as they slowly dissolve into Caspian.
Yeah, it was this jam to me when I was listening to it feels a lot like a standard formula for a late 90s jam, but done like executed perfectly. You know there are some where it's not done as well, or they don't sound as dialed into each other, or it's a little bit messier. But I think this Oswego Piper is just a perfect example of that formula just working.
I definitely agree. They get connected in a different way than they do in jams now, and that's the beauty of the evolution of the band. That different eras give you different sounds and different jams, different ways that they work together because they're all drawing on their own influences and experiences. And this is when they're still pretty fresh from 97. 98 was just a continuation of 97. And then 99, Trey got to embark a little bit on some solo stuff. They went to Japan. They went to Japan
After this show. Yeah. It's like
after
a
this
week
tour.
later.
Um,
The
2 weeks
Phil
later.
and Friends, the Phil and Friends in April '99 also
Oh yeah, yep,
with Trey and
yeah. The
Page.
whole everything from '97 all the way through New Year's '99 is just it was a hell of a time to get into the band.
No
Like
kidding.
it was really 3 years of just wow. Oh no, the band's this good. That's great, and it hooked me in even more. And then summer 2000, when I went to go see as many shows as I possibly could, I would it was holding up to the bar of 97, 98, and 99, and just remembering what potential there was. And then all of a sudden in the fall, they call it quits. And it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
so
So wait, when was your first show?
first show was December 13th, 97 at the
Nice.
Nick in Albany.
Nice. Great show. I mean, fall
Yep.
'97.
Yeah.
That's good.
Also the last time Phish ever had an opener. With
Oh.
J. Willis Pratt and Bionic. I was just watching his documentary the other day, and it's the first time I've seen footage of that opening band from the show since I was there watching this band play on stage. I'm like, I didn't know we got an opener at these shows,
Yeah,
and you
that's
normally
actually
don't.
that's like a frequent question I get from my friends. Like, wait, you go see Phish, like they don't have an opener? Like you're going just to see Phish? I'm like, Phish plays for 3 hours. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
And it's they're never a band that I associate with having an opener. Like so many
Mm-hmm.
bands do, and we'll have like, support acts if they do a 3-day run, whatever. And just Phish in my mind, I think it would be weird for them to have an opener.
Yeah, beyond like playing Sugarbush in '94 and some random shows in the early '90s, I don't know that they ever like had openers very often. It doesn't really come to mind unless they run a multi-band bill.
Yeah, well, yeah, they did like with Dave Matthews Band and in like '94 a bunch of times,
Oh
and
yeah, yep,
Panic in like '92. I think
yeah.
Phish and
They
Panic would
yeah they
switch.
swapped a few shows. Yep, yeah. That was about the extent of it. So catching fish with an opening band is kind of definitely unique and rare.
That's a thing to flex on your stats. So the Piper that I picked, it's hard to find a 3.0 Piper that stacks up to something
Hmm.
like the 1.0 versions, mostly just because of the slow build that really doesn't exist in 3.0. And so I went with the Dix 2016 Piper.
Nice.
I really like this one. Um, you know, I think they do some cool things in the drums segment, though it's not my favorite part of the jam, but I think it's definitely out of all the Marimba Lumina / rotation jams in 2016, I think this is probably the most cohesive example. And the jam before and after the drums part, is phenomenal. Phenomenal. While, there's 4 less minutes of build in this one. The vocals start just after a minute instead of 5.
Hmm.
Um, but I really like the way that, you know, I listened to your version first and then this one, and I was kind of thinking to myself, like a little bit of a parallel in the Type 1 section, listening to the way Trey approaches that section in 2016 versus 1999. Instead of going, balls to the walls, a million notes a minute, he's obviously, because, he can't play a million notes a minute anymore.
Hmm.
But the way he approached it melodically, and there was a lot of controlled feedback in the 2016 version, which I really liked, and big sustain. And so I think it's really cool, um, in jams like this to compare the sounds from the two eras.
Yeah, the Piper's a song that's had a bit of an evolution in a shorter amount of time than say Hood or well, Hood's probably the best example because people used to not shout Hood during it, and that's a completely different variation. We have with Piper, it was always just a slow build. It slowly creeps up. On Farmhouse, the album, um, there's some crowd noise worked into the studio track, and it gave it that feel of like, oh yeah, Piper's coming, it's going to be great. And there's some other shows where I remember it would just pop up, and if it was a slow build, it was just like, yes, all right, we're going to build up the anticipation. And then I think something happened toward the end of 2.0 and working into 3.0 where Trey was just wanted to get to it and
Yeah.
just wanted to play. And then in especially in 3.0 it was keep the flow going, because Piper kind of works best out of some high energy jam. It's a Disease Piper, or a 2001 Piper, or anything where there's something preceding it that's going to give it some energy. Like what comes before that Dick's Piper?
Comes
Uh,
out of Steam.
Same, yeah, perfect. Because like it can slowly work out of that, and just as Steam can kind of build out of something similar,
Yeah.
it gives it that room. But with Steam, it's like if it's a slow funk outro moving into something new, they could take it for a spin. But then sometimes they just like, all right, we're rocking and rolling. Why are we gonna be patient here?
Yeah. What was actually
I,
even though it's not a slow build by any means. It's interesting to hear my dad pointing this out when I was I watched that Dick's show last night. My dad pointed out to me that right as they started Piper, Fishman tried to push the tempo a little bit, and Trey was like no and like slowed it down
oh,
for the intro, which interesting because wasn't a very long intro, and I think the closest we've come to a slow build in 3.0 is the Dick's 2019 Piper,
mhm.
because I remember at the
Yeah,
time being like oh my god, like that's much longer than we've seen in a while,
yeah.
and much more of a
I,
build.
I'm sitting here trying to remember the last time that we got the slow build, and that was it, and it was welcome. And some folks like, oh my god, they're really taking it slow, and I'm like, yeah, this is how it used to be. It's the Piper the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was interesting to me. I think um, also how quickly this song went from being like no jam at the time of its debut to being this 25-minute monster in just a couple of years. If you listen to the versions from like summer '97, they're like 4 minutes, and it just cuts off at the end of the verse, and they don't have a jam, which is cool. At least the first few versions.
Yeah, and yeah, there's some that are just truncated short ones that might be 4 or 5 minutes long, and it's just like, let's hurry up and get to the next one. And it's that little bit of ADD Trey, or just the drive to push through a lot of songs, like the Dinner and a Movie we saw last week, from New Hampshire. That Mike's Groove is huge, and there's a whole bunch of songs built into it. But as you start to look at it, it's like, all right, they're just gonna like stack this one, and you'll get 10-minute versions of songs rather than some super exploratory thing.
Right.
And that's and when they're feeling like there's no obligation to rush and that any song can go into the flow, that's when I think they shine the best.
Definitely, and I think that I mean that Dinner and a Movie is a good example of like I think Scott Marks called it a type B set list. Um,
Yep.
but it's a cool way of looking at a show. Instead of a show with like, oh my god, like a 5-song set, you're getting bust outs and antics and great flow and high energy, which honestly is like just as good in my eyes to see live. And the issue is they would go kind of in the middle for a lot of years in early
Mhm.
3.0, I think, where you know there wouldn't be long jams, and you would have a set list that kind of was more songy, but you weren't getting like bust outs particularly, or like wild song selection. It was just like rip chords, which is interesting.
Yeah, the ripcords can be painful. There's definitely 2010 and a couple of years after that, or definitely some years where we'd find that as the band was getting their full groove back, and Piper Piper is no stranger to the ripcord, where it just all of a sudden, you were getting there. It was getting out there,
It
and
gets ripcorded, and I'm pretty sure there are a lot of ripcords into Piper. I
yeah,
just feel like
that would
that's
be
a song that Trey,
ripcord friendly on both ends.
yeah, yeah, it's
It's
just
the it's the human centipede of Phish songs.
that's good. Um,
Oh, that's
so
sorry for the
so
visual.
let's go into these jams a little bit more. I think one of the cool things about the Type One flamethrower shreddy portion of the Oswego one is that Trey's use of the reverse delay, which was a big hallmark of '99. I think he really started using it a lot that summer, if I remember correctly. I think that's when it started becoming very widely used. And I really like listening to the way he solos over that, because the way that his reverse delay works, it's when he plays a note, it doesn't immediately play it backwards. There's like a couple seconds of delay before the note comes out backwards. So he's playing without getting any sound out immediately. So I feel like that's not, I'm not a guitarist, but I feel like that's not easy to do.
Uh, Same. I'm not a guitarist. The way that he, starts to make his way into the jam, and the use of the delay gives it that. It gives it like a staggered uh, feel to it, as like he's playing the notes and then they're coming out moments later, and with whatever pedal he's using on that, especially towards the end of the song, it really um, jumps out as something unique and that you don't hear. And all the while, um, Phish and Gordo are holding down a wonderful groove as he's just kind of layering over everything.
Yeah, I think Mike's bass line is phenomenal in this one. I wish we had a soundboard of it so I could hear it in all its glory.
I I do hope that one day Camp Oswego is released and it's all of its glory with some bonus material. I think one thing that's preventing him from doing that is that there's Sun Seals and Del McCoury sit-ins. There's quite a few covers throughout the whole both days, and I would just love to see proper packaging on a box set like that, because that was a very fun, unique weekend, especially a festival mid tour with other bands playing. Like it was a true festival. I'm pretty sure it's the only festival Phish had planned out to have other bands at.
Didn't they, at the
Which,
at Clifford Ball they had an orchestra of some kind? I think, didn't they?
oh yeah, they had that orchestra playing in between sets. That
Yeah,
was, oh wow, yeah,
but
good memory. There's a name for
I,
them too.
I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, I don't remember if it's from up north or Vermont, but yeah, that was a cool set. That was a hard find back in the day for tapes. You had to look out if that was a filler or something.
Yeah,
Um,
I think, you know what, they should just do a late '90s festival box set, charge a few $100s for it, and everyone will buy it. Just do
yeah,
Went, Lemon Wheel, Oswego, Cypress. Massive box
they.
set.
I think then the day comes. It looks like it's the Plattsburgh Orchestra, but I got to look into that. Um, they Champlain, maybe the Champlain Valley Symphony. They I think when the day comes that they start to release box sets beyond, they've already done Clifford Ball, but we haven't gotten anything since. So I think they're just going to take their time and try to present it as properly as possible and probably hit on some anniversaries, because
Next year's
20
Went
25th.
25.
Yeah, I feel so old just thinking about that. That's 25 years of the Great Went, and then you get 25 years of Lemon Wheel, 25 years of Oswego and Cypress, and then a little bit of a break before it. So yeah, there's if Fish
Yeah,
is looking to do that.
and there's that bootleg FM rip of the Went, which I have,
Mm-hmm.
which it's better than the audience recording, but it's not the same as a properly mixed and mastered soundboard. Which
Yeah, I don't know which quality I have for the Went. I know whatever has been shared through from the archives shows has definitely been worked into whatever recording I have. So there's like, normal odd and then crispy soundboard track, and then moving
Yeah, I
on.
think it's Disease and Jin from the Went that were on a
Yeah.
live beta or from the archives
Hmm.
from a while ago. But yeah, Kevin Shapiro, if you're listening to this, release the festivals.
Release the festival cuts.
Yeah, I do think Oswego is cool because of the fact that it's mid tour, and I think it gets really overlooked um, in terms of late '90s festivals because of it being mid tour and stuff like the Went and Clifford Ball and Lemon Wheel being like grand finale to the tour, and it's kind of like a wrap up, and also it's in the
Mhm.
same year as Big Cypress. So if someone thinks festival from '99, they're thinking Cypress, not really
Yeah,
Oswego.
and that's part of why Oswego doesn't get as much love as it should, and it definitely does get some. But I mean, having that whole weekend was incredible. I was taking summer classes at Syracuse and moving into what was technically my junior year. They it was an hour drive, so when my buddies got there, we went from door to campsite within an hour. Barely sat in traffic. Got there Thursday night.
Hmm.
No, we got there. No, we got there on Friday. No, wait. No, we got there on Friday and Fish played Saturday, Sunday. We got there on Friday nice and early. Got to set ourselves up, get situated, and find our friends. Which back then you didn't have cell phones, so you had to either put a message on the board or luck out. And that was how things kind of worked out. As alarmingly hot as it was, you felt like you were still going to make it through the weekend. It
Where were
wasn't
you
a
during this Piper? How far from the stage?
well, let's say halfway back off to the right on Mike's side, and that's where we were for pretty much the whole show.
You mean Trey side in '99?
Oh yeah, Treeside, yes. Yeah, wow, yeah. It's been a minute from that. I would love to see
It's
video from there.
I always forget about the switched stage setup for '99 and 2000. Trey
It
over on the
was,
right.
it, yeah, that was how I got used to it. So in 2000, when they moved some things around and Fish moved to the back, and when they returned, it was slightly, pretty much the same. I was like, oh, okay, that's traditional. So when I went back and saw photos of Fish playing off to the right and us looking at, the glass divider between him and Mike, that was new to me. I was so used to like, oh, must be how it is. Bands just never change their position on stage, and they're not like a huge production wise band where there's like gigantic riser and
Like
um, you know
pyrotechnics and stuff like that.
pyrotechnics
Yeah.
and banners and artwork and everything. So
Yeah. That's another
um,
thing I
yeah.
love so much about Fish is that there's no like flair. Like they're just like four
Mm,
guys with their ridiculously large rigs of gear.
yep.
They just go on stage and they just play.
Yeah, it's one of the nice things is that they don't go for all the pomp and circumstance. They just get out there, play, and let the music do it, and let Kuroda do his thing.
Yeah.
And if it does come down to them doing some sort of stage decoration, it's something special, like New Year's or
Yeah.
the
And
Casbah
and it,
box set.
and if there's some sort of performance element to it, it's Fishman running around the stage during "Hold Your Head Up."
Yes,
Like
exactly.
nonsense.
We, we don't desire a lot. Just play the music. You
Yeah.
want to do something fun? Sure. But, half of us are closing our eyes and enjoying the moment, and the other half are watching the light show. So,
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. We don't need crazy, backup dancers and stuff unless like New Year's gag.
hmm.
Back to the music. Let's talk a little more about the music. One thing another thing I really liked about the Oswego Piper. I know it sounds like I'm really not championing my version very much, but this is a new jam for me and I really enjoyed it. When Trey switches to rhythm at like 11 and a half minutes, Fishman starts like playing along with Trey really well, and
Hmm.
you know yet another example of his talent as a drummer and his connection with Trey. And it's so cool the way he, within seconds of Trey latching onto rhythm, Fishman is like basically trading licks with him and playing, imitating what Trey's doing on the drums. And it's so cool how, while he's not a melodic player because he's playing drums, he can still, trade licks with and feed off of what Trey is doing. And it's awesome.
Yeah, the dynamic between Trey and Phish, and really any guitarist and their drummer, is one that you know, honestly, I kind of overlooked it for a little while because you associate bass and drums with the rhythm section, and the keys and the guitarist can link up and they're right next to each other. But Phish and Trey have a connection that goes a little bit deeper on the musical and personal level, and they will come up with some uh, sync that just launches them into another level. That right there. I think if we have to talk about who the two best musicians in the band are, it's Trey and Phish. And to have them get on board, it's easy for Mike to just get right into the groove that Phish sets, and for Page to fit right in the right spot. It's like they're the primaries, and the other two are the secondaries, just in terms of where these jams kind of come from, generally.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting also to look at the stage setup here. You talked about the keyboardists and guitarists usually being the ones that are doing all the interplay and whatnot. But Trey and Page are on opposite ends of the stage, summer '99, and the only person that Trey is next to here is Fishman. So he's obviously going to be more dialed into what Fishman's doing than what Page is doing on the other side of the stage. I think, especially because Page is just coming through his monitors, and Fishman he can probably hear because of proximity to the drums. So it's cool to look at not only that they're dialed in, but why they stuff like this might be more liable to happen here. And
Mm-hmm.
while we're on the topic of Fishman's insane drumming, in my Piper during the drums segment, it's so cool to listen to the different layers of the percussion. Like if you dissect, the mess of drums that's happening into what Trey's playing on the marimba lumina, Page and Mike kind of dicking around on the cymbals and whatever, and just Fishman holding down the beat. And like, to me, that's what makes this drums more listenable than a lot of drums from like the Dead. Because while those can be interesting sometimes, there are some sections of that where it's like Mickey and Billy just kind of randomly hitting different percussion things without any sort of form. And this, you've got a definite form the whole time. Like Fishman is still just driving the jam. I just think it's really cool to listen to that during that section.
Yeah, with it's impressive that what Fishman can do on the drums compared to what Mickey and Billy do in the Dead and all the other bands. They the two of them play off of each other, but at times it can seem cacophonous, and they're just kind of hitting random things, like you said. Phish, on the other hand, can take um, what Trey wrote on a drum machine in the case of Limb by Limb and play it on drums to the point where it's like, how are you doing this? And
Mm-hmm.
he's just it's like an octopus is on the kit back there, because it just doesn't seem like this can, it's human. And that, this is why Phish is such a we all know he's a great drummer, but I think compared to his peers and other drummers in music history, he's just underrated and overlooked. But the work he
Absolutely.
puts into it and the skill he has and the range he has and what he can do is truly phenomenal. It's why he and Trey are on just on in sync on a musical level.
Yeah, and another really cool thing about his drumming that I feel like I talk about all the time is like his touch on the drums. He's not hammering away at everything. He has a remarkably light touch. If you watch him play, like obviously sometimes he'll get more into it and will hit harder, but most of the time he's very gentle. And it's really cool to listen to. There was an interview with Stuart Copeland where he said when he went to see Phish once, after he had been with Trey and Oysterhead, Trey was like, "Come see the band," and so you know he went to see Phish, and he was I think he said this may have been in 2015 when he saw them, but he was in the audience and he was listening to Fishman's drums and how like loud they were, and then he went like side stage and he was watching Fishman play and was like blown away by how he's like barely touching the drums and getting so much sound and so much
Mm-hmm.
depth out of them, which is like it's just a testament to his insane talent. Where like I think Fishman probably practices the most out of anyone in the band. I think he
Oh,
does like
oh,
4 or 5
easily,
hours a
easily.
day at least,
Yeah,
which
yeah. The
is
fact that he's still practicing at that point, if you're gonna be great at something, you got to keep practicing at it constantly. You can't, you, know, you any skill or talent's gonna fade if you don't put a little effort into it and
mhm.
keep it regular. No matter if it's your day job or your hobby, or just something you're passionate about. And the work that Fishman puts into it is something that any drummer who's going to take want to be taken seriously should really consider, is how much are you practicing and how much time are you putting into it. Be off of a simple drum pad. You need the whole kit, and you can produce something far greater than you imagine the more you practice. And it's again, that goes across life in general, but for music especially, that skill is only honed by consistent practice, and with Phish it shows fully.
Yeah, and you know what? And also, if you want to be as good of a drummer as Fishman, you got to start out your drumming career like he did in the early '80s, where he'd wake up at like 5 or 6 in the morning, take a bunch of acid, go back to sleep for a couple hours, wake up, and then play drums all day.
Yeah,
Which
that
thank you
is.
thank you to the Undermined podcast for sharing that, because that was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, shout out to all the drummers out there who are going to try that and see how that goes. That's one of the most daring things I've heard of, and that was news to me off of Undermine. I can't imagine going back to sleep and then going and beating
Waking
on
up and
drums.
being like,
Here we are.
okay. Yeah, crazy, crazy. And then another really cool thing Fishman does in this Dick's 2016 Piper is coming out of drums. And he was doing it a little bit at the beginning of the jam. He's switching between, the regular like charging ahead jam they were doing and this halftime hi-hat beat really, really well, and seeming like in perfect time going off of Trey's, like deep, nasty, wah delayed notes. And it adds a really cool element to the jam when he switches the speed like that. And I think that's something, we don't see all that often, or we'll see it for like he'll go halftime for a couple of measures, like in Gin. I know like he does that in the Went Gin. But it was really cool to my ears to hear something like that. Just another further testament to him as a drummer.
Yeah, between the I think between the two versions, you get a nice full range of where the two of them can go. You know, it with Piper, Phish just gets locked in with Gordo, and with the Dix Piper, you get Trey locked in with Phish. So there's a different dynamic between the two, and it leads to two different jams as a result.
Definitely, and you can see in 2016 there was a lot more. Page was stepping up a lot more. This was his kind of like the last year before he really started taking charge in like 2017. But when he resists the drums jam, for a while. Like Trey goes to the marimba, then Mike's on percussion, and Page is basically trading licks on piano with them on drums and percussion, which is one of my favorite parts of the jam. Um, he's having fun over there, and it's a really cool sound. Um, Hearing Trey or Fishman echoing what Page is doing, or being so locked in and not just in their own little percussion world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paige will take a Paige will sometimes take a different route. When I was going through the Swego Piper, I had to go back a couple times and just really hone in on what he was doing, because it's certainly not as audible as Trey, but what he's putting together underneath is, kind of forming the backbone of what Trey's doing. And you know it Page can kind of give it that outer space galactic sound, not galactic the band, just kind of a
Yes,
spacey cosmic, that's the word, like a cosmic feel to it, where there's like, some psychedelia and funk worked into what he's thrown into the mix.
definitely, and I think there's less of that in this 1999 jam than a lot of other 1999 jams. Like he's on piano for the vast majority of it. He goes to the clav at like 16 and a half minutes. And Trey actually does a lot of the ambient stuff in this jam. Like he sets up uh ambient loops when he goes to the, into the funk zone of
Mm-hmm.
the Oswego Piper, and then I didn't hear when he started them, but I noticed around the 20-minute mark or so, his like little chirpy keyboard loops were going. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when you know when you get like a little something extra mixed in. That's when it's like, all right, moving to the next section of this jam, and it's like, where's this one gonna go? What's how's that gonna cause the others to react? And what's the next route for this whole jam? So it's always neat when you see Paige stand up, get to the clav, or you know Mike walk over and switch something up. It or Phish hops on the marimba.
Yeah, I
They yeah, it opens up a new opportunity, and that's the beauty of improv. You can start out with just adding one new thing in, and everybody just kind of goes off on that tangent.
yes, and it's a wonderful thing. I think
Yeah,
last few
yes.
minutes, the last few minutes of the Oswego Piper, I think it's 25 minutes long, so I can't really call it a ripcord, but I think they were they started to go off into this, like, started led by Mike, like Trey, I think was looking for the out into Caspian, or like the space out into, ambience, but Mike
Hmm.
started into this cool progression that reminded me of the 12-30-19 tweezer, like that middle synth section.
Hmm.
Like a So Mike started playing kind of
I
something reminiscent of that, and I'm kind of upset that they didn't, go into explore that, because he started going and it sounded like, you know, Page and Fishman were going to be on board with it, but then Trey was like, no, and went off into, was like, we're going into Caspian. But there was some, there was a moment where there was possibility of another, like, very melodic jam, which I think, you know, I love when that happens.
when that tweezer you're speaking of, there were parts of the Piper where I was like, oh yeah, that kind of it's got a little bit of that, and if any jamming is refined just oh so well, it's that 12-30-19 tweezer, with all the different sections, and there's a part, I want to say 8 or 9 minutes in, where it's just Page just takes it up another notch, and it feels like you're just floating the way that he's pushing it, and then the jam follows takes that route, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's just so beautiful. I can picture it though with the way Kuroda hit the lights in the garden. Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, like the 20-minute mark of that MSG tweezer is one of my favorite things that the band has done in the last bunch of years. Like, it's so gorgeous, and just like the as a keyboard player, hearing Page use the synth like that is just phenomenal. And just so good.
Yeah, as I've gotten to know Page's background history and influences, he pulls a lot from New Orleans and the meters and such, and it's cool to see what he can throw in that is in that range. And then there's the other stuff, which is more ambient electronic side of things.
Hmm.
I always wanted it this way. Page EDM thing and the new album he just put out. Those are areas for him to shine, because if he's got just he's got a unique set of skills. He's got all the tools he needs to make it happen, and he's doing some stuff that we should rightly be just like paying attention to and deeply analyzing, because he's I feel like if anybody has a solo career that is one to look forward to down the road, it's him, because he hasn't really done too much solo work or tours, and
Yeah.
boy, he could, you know I don't know if you know who Yanni is, but I can totally see Paige pulling a Yanni and having just keyboards all around him in a ring and playing wherever he played, the Parthenon or Coliseum or something. um, I hope I'm thinking of the right guy. Yeah, Yanni, and not the other guy is Raffi. That's another thing.
Like Banana Phone Raffi?
Yes, yeah. In my head, I was confusing them, but no, it's yeah, definitely Yanni. He's
That'd
got
be
some cool
fun.
stuff, but
Page
yeah, to
writing an
see what
album
Paige does.
of Page writing an album of Banana Phone like songs with like with like crazy spooky synths in the background. Yeah, I think yeah, Page is, you were talking about earlier about Fishman being a really underrated drummer. I think Page is also just, in pop culture and stuff like that, when people talk about the greatest keyboardists of all time, you know,
Mhm.
people aren't really talking about Page. I think, you know, out like I think Trey's the only one out of these guys that will make like, the Rolling Stone list of, best at their
Yeah,
instruments, even though all four
Fish
of them
should.
rightly deserve to be on the list, whether it be at the top or somewhere on. And if you're
Yeah.
doing, I would argue, I think they, when the four of them are on stage together, they are all the best at their instrument of all time.
Hmm.
I think on their own, maybe not. Like, they're obviously my favorite, but um, they are up there. If you take them out of the Phish context, just like, just Mike as a bass player, just Page as a keyboard player. Um, they're all easily, I think, top 30 of all time, at least.
Yeah, I think Fish is underrated. And if there was a real legitimate, thorough examination of best drummers of all time, and it wasn't too overloaded with jazz drummers, but just
Yeah.
just to give a little chance to everybody else, I think you'd see him on there for sure. I'm sure there's if you'd have Stanton Moore and Fishman on there among others because the talent they have behind the kit can't just be deferred to. Hey, he's great on the radio, or hey, he's great with this band. Like,
Or like, hey, he
cool,
played a
cool,
25
Max
minute drum
Weinberg, but
solo.
yeah, like if somebody's like, oh yeah, Max Weinberg's like, no, Max Weinberg is a drummer, but he's not like something who's been groundbreaking or people are looking up to and emulating.
Yeah.
Fishman, they are. Stanton Moore, they definitely are.
Yeah, like
Because those
innovating,
are
like doing something, like,
yes,
taking drumming in a new direction. Like someone that, I've been listening to a lot of Snarky Puppy lately, and someone like Larnell Lewis,
yep,
who's insane. Um, I think, yeah, you're like, yeah, Max Weinberg's a good example. Like, great drummer. But Springsteen songs and Springsteen shows, while Springsteen is awesome, like, I saw
hmm
him in concert a bunch of years ago and it was phenomenal. There's not really much room for innovation or, improv in them for him to do really exciting stuff the way that, Fishman does, at a Phish show, because they're not playing, a 20-minute Thunder Road.
yeah, yeah. I've seen Bruce, and I saw Max Weinberg plenty when he was on Conan as a band leader. It's you're playing standards. You just got to know the set list. But any band where they got to improv and work in different genres consistently throughout, not just the show, but a jam, and mix it up and go from throwing some African drumming to some jazz to some blues to just some straight rock
Yeah,
is
you go
not an
from like
easy feat.
Gaiuti to a Zeppelin cover, and
Yeah.
Fishman can just do that on a dime.
Yeah, and Gaiuti's a composition that's originally written for orchestra, and then you
And
have
the drumming for that song looks like so impossible.
mhm. Yeah, I Gaiuti was all that was one of the songs that hooked me when I got Story of the Ghost, and I hadn't heard it live yet, and I was like, holy, this is it's whatever 7 or 8 minute song on there, and it's a hell of a journey, but there's no let up, and then when you see an orchestra do it or Trey do it, um, outside of the band, it takes on a little bit of a different nature, but when you're seeing it with Fish, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, and it's always cool because I think I would say that Fishman is the one in the band that flubs the least. I would
Yeah,
say, followed by
yeah.
I think it goes in order of most to least. Like, Trey and then like huge gap, Page, Mike, Fishman.
Yep.
But it's, you know, playing, all the compositions like Yem, Reba, Gaiuti, stuff like that, and like not screwing up. Even when, they haven't played, Gaiuti in 50 or 60 shows, say, because we get it usually like once or twice a year. So maybe not that much, but like, they haven't played it in months. And that, I feel like that's a song that's, if you haven't played it in months, it's not easy to just pick up out of your pocket and be like, oh yeah, I remember this, and
Hmm.
when they talk about how they do set list construction, and while Trey has that list of songs in front of him that they had discussed earlier in the day, he may pull Fluffhead out of his ass because he wants to play Fluffhead, and
Hmm.
they all have to be ready. So it's crazy the amount of time that they all have put into learning all this material and practicing their skills. And while maybe they don't practice as much as they used to, with the exception of probably Fishman, it's still incredible to listen to how tight they are. Whether while some of the composed sections may be sloppier nowadays, I don't think we like since the last bunch of years I don't think there's been a night where we've had improvisation where they haven't been all like dialed in. There's ADHD Trey where he may ripcord a jam, but when they are in a jam, they are all 4/4 of the same brain, bar nothing.
Agreed. They can, the four of them work together probably better than any other foursome. You'd have a hard time making an argument for a foursome because, I mean, first of all, they've been together as that band with that lineup since '86, and not you. I can't think of a band that's been doing that long and hasn't replaced somebody at some point because of death or quitting or whatever. And there's just never going to be anything like it. No matter what jam bands pop up next, they're going to be in the shadow of these four and how they've brought themselves together.
Yeah, it's remarkable how 35 years and the four of them are still here and they still like each other.
Yeah, yeah. It's not like they're
Like
just
that's
like still.
like
It's not
not
like Townsend and Daltrey where they like kind of spite each other a little bit, but they're they have some sort of an understanding.
they're like,
Um,
we'll go on
but
tour and we'll make money.
yeah, but they're
Like
not like chilling and
Phish isn't
laughing and
here. Yeah, Phish isn't touring just to make money off of us. You know,
yeah.
like they're touring because they are having the time of their lives, and you see it with stuff like, the stage antics. Like the Fishmen hold your head up when Phish is like twerking in front of 20,000 people in an arena, and the other three are just just laughing. Like, what other band sells out the MGM Grand in Vegas and the drummer wears a muumuu, plays a vacuum, and twerks?
And the fans set the record for most alcohol sales at the venue.
We
There
did?
are. Oh yes, we did. And that was just in I believe that was in 2016. We
Oh my
probably did
God.
it in 2014, but we beat out some boxing event because I know there's undercards at boxing, but we're gonna beat that in a night or three or whatever. Like you know, kind of proud of that. Kind of makes us, but it's Vegas.
I love
Why
that.
would you
That's funny.
be?
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's there has never been a band like them, and there will never be another band like them. This is a once in a lifetime, once in an ever occurrence, I think.
I think you're 100% right. And no matter what jam bands pop up or what unique gag there is or how a band tries to emulate the magic of Fish, it won't happen. It's the Disco Biscuits are probably one of the only examples I can think of that come close because it's still the same. They replaced the drummer, but that was very friendly terms, because he went off to be a doctor. They uh, they're the only band that I think is comparable, but still they're just much smaller, and um, they're in the same vein, and they're certainly not copying them. But what jam band isn't a foursome at this point? And with guitar, drums, bass, and
I
and
mean,
uh,
a lot of jam
keys.
bands have either percussion or a second guitarist or both.
Yeah, and they'll change it up and mix it up slightly,
Yeah,
and it can be very um, everybody's kind of following in the shadow of Phish in the same way that a lot of bands were uh, falling in the shadow of the Dead in the 70s and 80s. And unless, if it was the 70s, it was, did you come up with the Dead? Are you going to just kind of open with them and people follow you too? Or what's going to be new here? And I think the Dead were such a force that you didn't really have anybody that was ready to do that. But then you have Phish, who took a little bit of a page of the Dead and a little bit of page of some other bands and artists, and made their own destiny. And now Phish has become the more um, em, is this a word, emulatable bands, where
yeah,
let's follow what they're doing because it works. And Fish's method did work from the beginning of playing college towns, and those fans spreading the word to younger kids, and those folks showing up and doing a little bit of what the Dead did, playing their own festivals, doing things that are groundbreaking and not just following the same vein of doing the same old. It's one of the best parts of this is that we're seeing this history get made as we're a part of this, and go down the road, and we'll be able to say, yeah, we knew all about that, and I'm glad you're all catching it now, and let us tell you how great it was. So
yeah,
it's like the open secret.
yeah. I think that's a perfect place to wrap up the
Mhm.
episode. Um, as you said, best band. And yeah. So thank you so much, Pete, for coming on and talking about Piper and all the other things that we talked about. It was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, thanks again so much.
Hey, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun, and yeah, looking forward to hopefully seeing some Fish this summer.
We all hope. Yeah,
Yep.
so thanks for everybody for listening to this episode of We Move Through Stormy Weather. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time for our Season 1 finale.